Pastor Rob, would you like to start us in prayer?
All right, let's bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we are thankful to be here tonight to learn a little bit more about how we can grow our gardens better and how we can use the materials that we have and not have to buy a lot of materials and stuff that cost a lot of money. And we just pray that you'll give Brother Todd the words to speak, that we can learn more and more about how to grow good food for our families. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you for coming out. I personally don't like driving a lot in the dark, so I appreciate those of you that did. And I'll tell you right now, I appreciate prayer because I have over 90 slides, and if I was able to cover one a minute, that would take an hour, and I'm not going to keep you. I'm going to try to stop right at 7:30. So if some of you met us at the garden show, there's where we had to sign up for this garden class. I used the corn because I was impressed myself with the size of this corn. I can't even reach the ears to harvest them, and so we'll have more pictures of those. But the more I eat from my own garden, the better I feel. And those are the banners that we've used at the garden show for years. They're painted for us by an Amishman. The Lord's healing leaves. We use a lot of natural remedies, herbs and things. I personally avoid. I've had 7 children. Now I have 5 grandchildren, and I avoid the doctor unless I need a diagnosis as much as possible. And with that many children, we've saved thousands of dollars doing simple things for your simple. And if you eat a healthy lifestyle as far as possible, a lot of the things we bring upon ourselves just by eating too much processed fried food. So it's nothing new to most of you. So it's not just miraculously tall variety of corn. It is a method of growing because, well, this is 2019. This is the corn that I've been saving as a family, our own variety of corn that we've been saving for probably over 25 years. And you can see it was nearly as tall. It was 12 foot tall, 10 to 12 foot average. And then this other stuff averaged about 12 to 13 foot tall. It was from my daughter-in-law in Honduras. We just brought that back. And so I planted that 2 months late. Corn is the dent corn should be planted earlier. It was planted probably towards the end of July. I know we had a campfire in the garden, and it still produced. And if any of you want to try that, they used it like a sweet corn. I was really impressed when we tried it in Honduras when it's young and tender. So just take half an ear, and that'll be probably 150 seeds or so. We brought back 200 seeds. So if you want, that way 4 people could try it, you're welcome to take it home and try the seed. Because it's, with it up that far, it was harder for the raccoon. I didn't have any raccoons touch it, and I didn't have the crows. The crows have been really giving me a hard time. So and you can harvest it. You just break the corn down. My daughter-in-law, she just showed me they just grab it here and bend it down, and then let it dry instead of putting it in shocks. So the corn that I'm growing, I like purple. So I've been trying to select purple. We call it surprise corn for years. And there's a story behind that, but the corn seeds store best on the cob. If you're a seed saver, the cob actually keeps it at the right humidity. And we had some in our basement, and the wood stove was down there. We had it there for a few years, and the seed still was viable, even though with the wood stove down there running, but it was on the north side. So I found it doesn't do quite as well if you have it where the sunlight comes in and hits it. You do want to have it in a darker area, because I had some hanging up in a southern access where in my office where the sunlight gets on it, and it doesn't hold the germination over several years. as well. So you either want to keep it on the cob in a darker place, I have it hanging up, or put it, if you take it off and shell it, put it in the refrigerator, and corn will last for years. Because there are years that we can't plant the corn. If our neighbor's planting Roundup Ready corn, you have to either offset it by a few weeks so you don't cross-pollinate with theirs, or you just wait and plant it another year. And then the next year, I had coyotes eat almost all my sweet corn, and so I just had a few kernels here and there that they didn't clean off the cobs. So there are some years I almost lost my corn. So gardening within reach. This year, I have not used fertilizer for several years now. I have not purchased any fertilizer for several years, and I don't have a problem. I think there's a lot of garden methods that work, and there's nothing wrong with buying fertilizer, but I kind of take pride in learning how to live off the land and being able to teach people how to do it. Because what if you can't buy fertilizer? And there's kind of this romantic idea, I think, that a lot of folks think about the time of no buy, sell, and trade, that you would like to be able to grow a garden if you can't buy food. However, my personal conviction on that is, how many of you have grown tomatoes? Almost everybody here. From the time you plant the seed to the time you eat the tomato, how long is that? It's about 3 months plus. So if all of a sudden you can't buy, sell, or trade, now is the time to be growing because of all the GMOs. And like I say, the more I eat from my garden, the better I feel. So I just grow my garden every year. And when it comes to that time of no buy, sell, or trade, like Isaiah 33 says, your bread shall be given and your water shall be sure. Trust in him to take care of your garden today and your health today. And I don't know how that's all going to work out, but I think gardening is important today with all the processed GMO food. So zero fertilizers, I do have some neem oil, but I didn't use any this year. I brought a lot of groceries in this year, right, dear? And I wasn't even planning on gardening that much, but because we do homeschooling, I've got one more in the homeschool and have a lot going on. But I use zero sprays. We have bugs, so I learned how to work with them. I don't like to breathe in the sprays myself, even if they're organic, when they're concentrated. And zero animal compost on my corn. I do use we do have some sheep, and I'll put that around my fruit trees, but I don't normally put it in my compost pile. So there's a lot of ways to garden. I do all of it. I've used fertilizer. I've used the garden back to Eden wood chip method. I do raised bed garden, grow bed gardening, conventional, aquaponics, you name it. Use terracing. We've gardened in several states. We've gardened in Bolivia, and you can just use all of it within your reach that works. Here's the spot where we grew the sweet corn this year. The reason I planted that corn late is because there wasn't a garden there. I had to remove some old grow beds that were too close. I couldn't get my lawnmower in between them. Remove those, and then we took some old wood and we burnt it. Had a campfire. Brother Shane was there, and we put your logs out with water so they don't burn all up into ashes. And you have charcoal left. So Juby and I broke that charcoal up. We took shovels and threw it around in this area and tillered it in. And I didn't use any compost on this corn at all. We got this 13-foot tall corn. But I want you to see something. The corn there on the left is sweet corn also, 3 different varieties, and it's about 2 foot tall. I grew that this year, and it was a failure. So I like to learn from my failures and teach from my failures. I've had a lot of failures, and I think if you just have success, you can't teach anybody what to do to have success, because you don't know why you had success necessarily. It might just be the Lord blesses sometimes. So what did I do wrong with that 2 foot tall sweet corn? I'm sorry? A little bit, but very, very little. There's very little in that whole plot there. I planted several rows that were over 100 foot long, and we had one meal. And so the rest of it I just tillered under. Well, I did grow the purple corn here really tall one year. I'll tell you what, any of you know what Johnson grass is? Okay, Johnson grass got out of control in this area, and I wasn't sure what to do. So I've got this 1,200-pound rototiller on the back of my tractor, and I tillered it, and then I let it sun dry it out in the middle of the hot summer for a week, and then I tillered it again and let it dry out for a week, and I tillered it again, and after I did that 4 or 5 times, there's very little Johnson grass still coming up. And I did it to control the Johnson grass, but I hated to do it because I knew I was killing my earthworms at the same time. I love to use hand tools. My favorite, I'll show you, I have a picture of it, is just 3 tines or a pickaxe with a 1 tine. I don't like to even use the blade side because you chop earthworms in half. And fertilizer, I've gone there. I won't put fertilizer in my soil anymore. I might put it in a pot if I'm sowing seed for somebody and I need to produce a lot of peppers or something for Baker Creek, but I won't put it in my soil because of the long-term damage it does and the time it takes to recover with using strong fertilizers. There are older fertilizers that were more simple, like monocalcium nitrate, but these triple superphosphates things, they just burn up your soil, and it takes a long time to recover and build it back up and get the compaction out. There's air and life in there, and when you pack it down, the stuff suffocates. And I have tillered over my soil with a rototiller, and then I got down on my knees to plant my plants, and I see the worms chopped in half, and I see them wriggling around, and I think, oh, I feel bad. If you get down and look at what you've just done. And they really make a big difference. That's one reason I don't have to. That's one reason this corn is so tall, because the earthworms were healthy there. So what I like to do if I have to use the tiller is I'll tiller, like when I plant rows of blueberries in the yard, just tiller 1 strip really fast. I don't put it in slow speed until it looks like baby, smooth, fine soil. It looks really nice, but I'll tiller really fast, and that just kind of mulches it up and doesn't kill as many. And then I leave the grass in the middle, and then the earthworms can repopulate from the sides. So instead of tillering up the whole field like I used to. So I dried that sweet corn inside when we harvested it so we could replant. And I'm planting trees in that area, tree seeds. Instead of having shocks outside and letting the rain get in it and the mice get in it, there's already enough things to fight. We just had a small enough amount, so I dried it on this cattle panel, horse panel, goat panel, whatever it is, that we dry our onions on. And that worked out good. The corn matured. Of course, my best corn's at home. I didn't bring it, the seeds I'll have for next year. Glyphosate abused soil. So I brought up sugar because sugar is one of the things I use to grow this corn. And I'll come back to that. But if you have bought some property and you some farmland or you don't know what the people have done on it, and you're conscious of your soil, you think they probably sprayed Roundup on this soil, which is a chelator. It pulls the nutrients out of the food instead of putting it in, and that's why the plants die. If you've had soil, there's hope. You take a little bit of sugar. What does sugar do to the yeast in your bread? Causes it to raise. Sugar does the same thing to the bacteria in the soil, the bacteria in your body, the yeast, the fungus. It feeds on it and grows and multiplies. So if you take 1 5-pound bag of sugar and spread it over an acre, and you do that once or twice a month, and it's warm enough, it will multiply the bacterial, the microbial activity, and they will take the chemical and break it back down into elements and make it safer. So you might have heard when there's industrial waste in where those companies have just ruined the soil, they take earthworms in there and put them in there. I used to think, well, how is that going to work? Do they take the earthworms back out of the soil? No, the earthworms take this bacteria around in their stomach, and that bacteria is what breaks it back down into. So something simple like sugar is a blessing. Now, beware of Pioneer sugar from Michigan, where I grew up. beet sugar is 95% GMO beet. So use sugar cane if you're going to use sugar. And sugar cane, don't listen to AI. It's like using a calculator. You have to be able to know if the answer you get's realistic or in the ballpark or not. AI will tell you that there's a lot of GMO sugar cane in the United States. It's not true. The sugar cane in Brazil has been released in 2017 as GMO, that they can use it in the industry. But only 1% of all the sugar cane they grew this year was GMO sugar cane in Brazil. And we do import Brazilian sugar cane into our country, although we grow most of our own sugar cane. And Trump put a 50% tariff on that. So probably most likely any sugar cane you buy is non-GMO sugar cane. And when in doubt, just buy organic. I use organic sucanat, which is sugarcane natural. And we don't use that much sugar anyway, so it makes it affordable. Probably 50-pound bag for $70 lasts us a year or two. We use it for bread making. And so I just use a handful of that and mix it in a bucket with my molasses. So my corn, trying to think, I do it different ways, depending on whether it's springtime and my comfrey's up, or it's the middle, or the comfrey's not up, or it's the middle of summer, and I have plenty of comfrey. I'll dehydrate comfrey for next spring. If I plant my corn before the comfrey is up, I have dehydrated comfrey, and I'll just throw a handful of sugar and mix it in with my comfrey powder, and throw that in a pickaxe a row. So I work it down deep for the corn, put in about a bean can full of limestone from the quarry, because everything needs calcium. Right here is a calcium laboratory. Plant radish. Radish grow fast. If you have one taproot on your radish, you have plenty of calcium in the soil. If you have lots of taproots, that means it's looking for calcium. There's not enough calcium. And almost all your other fertilizer, nutrients, elements ride in the root hairs attached to calcium. So if you don't have calcium, you need calcium in your soil. So I always add calcium. If you get more than, say, 20, 30 inches of rain a year, you lose 500 pounds or more of calcium per acre. So I just add it when I'm planting my seeds. It neutralizes the soil and gives your seeds a better chance to germinate. Because if you ever notice, if you work the soil up in the springtime and it rains, you'll get a different weed than if you work it up in the middle of summer and it rains. Because weeds have different temperature. You might get lamb's quarters in the spring and amaranth pigweed in the summer. So there's always weed seeds, but whatever weed seed, that it protects the soil from erosion. And whatever weed seed populates first, it sends out of the root hairs chemicals that turn off all the other seeds so they don't germinate. So they're still there for several years until they're needed. So if you put limestone in, it helps to neutralize the soil so your seeds will germinate. It gives them a fair chance unless you're transplanting. The nitrogen fertilizer. 78% of every breath I take is filled with nitrogen. Why then is it a $200 billion industry every year? Why are we paying for nitrogen to put on our soil? Convenience. Well, is it convenient if you have to go to work to earn $200 billion? Or is it just, it's the most abundant element in the air. It's literally smashing down on the Earth's surface on the soil all over the planet. So that was strange to me. How did conventional farming evolve into paying $200 billion instead of taking up the free gift of heaven? So what did the pioneers do? Well, they did crop rotation. When I was a child, I used to take delight in the farmer that farmed. My dad worked at Kellogg, so the neighbor, he farmed Dad's property, and he rotated the crops, but he didn't just rotate one crop on all the property. He put little plots, so I could see the wheat and the rye and the barley and the alfalfa, and the alfalfa had blue flowers and some yellow flowers, and there's butterflies everywhere. What a delight as a child. Now my children grow up and all they see is corn and soybeans, corn and soybeans, corn and soybeans, at least up in the north. They rotate back, and you know why soybeans, why they rotate, because it's a legume, and it's a nitrogen fixer. It will bring nitrogen out, but we can get nitrogen out of a lot of sources. If you pull up the roots, if it's a bean plant, it has little BB-like root nodules. That's where the bacteria lives. You might have to inoculate your soil the first time to get that bacteria in there, and it pulls nitrogen out of the air and it puts it in the soil. You have different varieties for peanuts, some for soybeans, some for your green beans, and that will put nitrogen in the soil. But grass has nitrogen in it. Comfrey has nitrogen. Most of your green things have nitrogen. That's the protein stored. And so the farmers that farmed my dad's field that hadn't been farmed in 30, 40 years, instead of putting nitrogen on it, they just turned under the soil with all that grass, and they said that'll add a lot of nitrogen this year. It had just been sitting. So I know a gentleman in Arkansas, he piles up the grass, and we did that years ago. We used it, my wife used grass around the tomatoes, and they did great. Grass works. So Exodus 9:25, and the hail smote throughout all the land of Egypt, all that was in the field, and the flax and the barley was smitten, for the barley was in the ear, and the flax was bold or budded. But the wheat and the rye were not smitten, for they were not grown up. So we can learn what time of year. You can read the Bible, even if you don't believe in the Bible. You could read the Bible and find out what time of year. If your dad wasn't a farmer, my dad wasn't, I can look in there and learn, because the Lord used a lot of nature lessons to explain spiritual lessons. We can use those spiritual lessons and go back and figure out how some of these gardening principles are in the Bible. And so you see, when they planted in Egypt, I think this was in Egypt, what time of year they planted these different grains, and some of them were up and some of them weren't. So the point of bringing this up is crop rotation. If you plant a big monocrop, like my farmer planted 100 acres of the same thing across the field, he's had a lot of crop failures watching over the years. But if you plant a lot of variety, whether you have hot or cold, wet or dry, hail, wind, something's going to survive. Just like that, if it's 100 degrees and my tomatoes stop growing, my cucumbers stop growing, that broadleaf thyme is going to grow. It loves it at 100 degrees. Malabar spinach loves it at 100 degrees. Variety. This was Uchi pines. We had a lot of variety there. A lot of the Asian people and islanders, South American, would come by and smile because and some of the Americans that were locals, they walked by and they said, "What is this stuff? We don't know how to use it." But we grew a lot of variety. I enjoy growing things that don't normally grow in the area because the insects they're not there either. They're not established. A lot of variety. If you grow one variety and the insects, I remember the farmer said his soybeans, he thought it was the drought, and he got out in the middle of his field and realized the insects were eating his soybeans. That's why the plants were dying. So he flew over in an airplane, crop dusted them to kill them. Gardening resources within reach. I might not be able to reach my ear of corn, but I can reach all these plants on my property. Comfrey, we grew the first year my son grew some sweet corn. It was 18 inches tall, yellow, and had no food on it in the native soil. We had this nice bottomland soil, but it was dark colored. That doesn't dark mean it's healthy. Good black soil usually, but it was really sticky with magnesium when we had it tested. And magnesium is a blessing here in Missouri. You have all these hills. Magnesium makes the soil stick together. If you didn't have magnesium, it'd all wash down the river until you get ready to terrace it or use it. It's nice to have magnesium, so that's a blessing. But so the first year I got success with the corn is when we use comfrey. We pickaxe a row, put a little bit of compost in there, just a couple of inches in that trench, and then a handful of comfrey with the limestone and the sugar. That's it. And so the compost I put in there, because that had bacteria in it. And the surface of these comfrey leaves is like a cow's tongue. It's fuzzy. I think it's harder for the rain to wash the bacteria off. It's known for having B12 producing bacteria on comfrey. And so I looked for other plants on the property that had like fuzzy like a cow tongue, like this cupweed here. You see the water and around the square stem of the cupweed. Cupweed gets about this tall, and you see it wild growing down the road. It's big green leaves, and it feels like a cow's tongue. If you've ever been licked by a cow's tongue, it's kind of abrasive. They can lick up the grass with it. It's not slippery and slimy. They grab a hold of you. So with that comfrey, all my corn was 10, 12 foot tall. So I wanted to test it the next year. I grew corn. In one row I put comfrey, one row I put cupweed, another row I put Paulownia tree leaves, and another row I put Vitex leaves, which is a slippery leaf. But I had misunderstood that Vitex was a nitrogen fixer. I thought this will be great, and it actually wasn't. I had confused with another plant. But all 4 rows were 10 to 12 foot tall. So that tells me that the Lord gives us a lot of things, a green plant. Well, it was the same spot that we had the 18-inch corn, same soil. So, but that was a previous year. Now corn, you can grow lettuce and okra and other things in the same soil and not have to put anything in. They're not heavy feeders. Corn's a heavy feeder. Sunflowers are heavy feeders. Peppers, tomatoes are heavy feeders. And if you don't use some sort of nitrogen, you're just not going to get much. I'll get a few peppers, but if you want a lot of peppers, you need to figure out a source of nitrogen. These are Paulownia leaves. Paulownia is an imported Asian. It's one of the fastest growing, and the beautiful flowers. Sometimes I've got them down in the bottom. Paulownia tomentosa is right at zone 6, I think, is the coldest it can take, the most hardy variety. So down in the bottom, about half of my trees will freeze back. And when they freeze back, they have these huge leaves on the young trees. And the sheep have learned to eat those. They're smelly and they don't like them at first, but it makes great fertilizer. Yes, ma'am. Yes, and I don't, because they stink. And Mr. Sutton, where I got these from in Tennessee, he's the Paulownia guy. They have like a whole convention. He said, yeah, I eat them, but he doesn't. I don't think he eats them a lot. I think he just says that you can. But they almost smell to me like you go in an old cigarette lounge. And when I was in the military, it smells kind of like that. So it's not very pleasant fragrance. But the sheep don't like it at first, but then they fight each other for it after they get used to it. And I learned from one of your husband's family said that during the years that there was a drought and the farmers had to sell off their cattle, he would go out in the field and cut down a tree, and the cattle would eat the leaves, and he was able to keep his cattle. So I use this for drought time when our pasture's low. We just go out every day and break off a branch and give it to them. It works great for fertilizer and great for the animal. So not only is grass a good source of nitrogen, but it takes up every element the Lord made. There's 92 naturally occurring elements on your periodic table of elements. If you remember chemistry, grass will absorb all of them. You read Daniel chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar lived on grass for 4 years, 7 years. Okay, chapter 4 or 7 years. And so people have used wheatgrass juice to overcome cancer. Sometimes the weak link, there is no, we all know there's no way to overcome death. We're all going to die one day or sooner or later, but sometimes we can lengthen that time. It may be that we're just missing, the one missing link is we're missing some elements, and for enzyme functions in our body, for our immune system. And so if you put a little bit of sea solids, like you just put a pinch of sea solids and dissolve that and rinse your sprouts with it, wheatgrass will take up every element. If you took 1 tablespoon of dehydrated sea salt, sea minerals, that's non-processed, that's just out of the ocean, and you mix that with 1 gallon and put it over 100 square foot about 3 times in the season. That has helped people overcome stage 4 cancer. And I have a testimony from that from a friend of mine that taught me about sea solids. It was a friend of his that overcame stage 4 cancer. Yes, Joe? You have to get a special juicer. If it's young and tender, you can chew it up, but as soon as it gets a little bit fibrous, you about choke on the fibers. But you can, they have like the old cast iron. You can buy expensive ones, but I have a $99 stainless steel hand manual one. You just put the grass in there and it'll juice the grass out. And it's pretty sweet. Wheatgrass is really sweet. You could juice sugarcane is a grass as well. I'm almost fearful to use something that sweet when you're fighting cancer, but I know people have overcome cancer with, and I don't know what type of cancer it was. I think it was Angie Clementi had stage 4 melanoma, I believe, the one that started eating food grown with wheat with C90. So there's a list of the chemical analysis of all the minerals that are in the ocean. Everything washes into the ocean all the rivers, and doesn't matter if you go to the Atlantic, Pacific, Mediterranean. If they measure the minerals, the 92 naturally occurring elements, they're all at the same ratio. If anything extra sinks to the bottom. And that ratio is almost identical to healthy human blood. So there have been time of wars, I think it was World War II, when there were too many injuries, they didn't have enough blood donors. They pasteurized ocean water. They watered it down a little bit. I don't know what ratio. They put it in people instead of blood, and that saved their life. Salt water. And I've noticed I had about, I don't know, 100 feet away, I had some tomatoes planted without sea solids and some tomatoes that I did water with sea solids, and they took 2 or 3 more frost than the ones with no sea solids. So if you rate it, it changes, you throw it on to melt the ice, and it changes the boiling point in your water. You don't throw it in your water, your beans don't cook as fast. So it does the same in plants. It boosts their immune system. Salt is not going to make them green like nitrogen, but it does boost their immune system. You can't see that, but it boosts your immune system and boosts the plant's immune system. We both have immune systems. Okay, so feeding the birds. How can feeding the birds and having a few goldfish in a horse tank help my garden? You know that all things work together. So on top of the hill where I live now, it was just a gravelly. There were no honeybees up there. I put a hive up there and I put swarm lure in that hive year after year and didn't catch anything. But we started planting flowers up on the hilltop and terrace the soil and plant some fruit trees up there. And the flowers attracted the beneficial insects. And we started feeding the birds up there, and the birds came. And it was just amazing some of the things we've learned there. This persimmon tree used to bear a little bit every other year. This is outside our kitchen window. Now, for the last 3 years, since we've have a bird feeder hanging there in the winter, and the little birds drop their droppings, this bears heavily every year. It actually starts to bend down with the weight of the persimmons on it from bird fertilizer. So I'm not sure how everything works, but I know it works. And so I have this fish tank here. I've got a little solar aerator. You may think it's cruel, but I don't feed them anything. I did have a little solar light there so it would attract bugs at night, and the bugs fall in and the fish eat the bugs. But I don't feed them fish food, because the fish food all has, I like to do what's called veganics, where you're not using animal blood meal and bone meal because of disease of the animals. I don't want to end up eating that. So I try to do things more simply and let the fish eat the plants and eat the insects. I just take that water out 1 jug at a time and water my potted plants with it. And the water's alive. It has bacteria in it. And it's room temperature. It's not going to shock, or it's whatever the outdoor temperature is, it's not going to shock as much as well water out of 300-foot deep well is going to be colder. and shut them back for a little bit. They go into stress. There's more to it, but any farmers out there? Any animals? You've raised livestock animals, chickens, goats, deer, cows, deer. I guess most of us don't raise deer. There is an Amishman in Seymour with deer. I grew up on a farm. May look like not a friendly picture to have in church, but most of you, if you're a farmer, you probably recognize the cow manure looks like cow manure always, and the horse manure looks like horse manure, and the sheep and the goat. And the rabbit, I understand, is a little more round, but they're small pellets too. But what's different about the chicken and the turkey and the peacock and the pigeon and the cardinals, what's different about their manure? You see the little bit of white in there that you don't see in all your grazing animals. What is that white? Does anyone know? Yes. She said they urinate, and have you ever seen a chicken urinate? No, they don't have bladders. That white part is the nitrogenous uric acid. Chickens and birds were made intelligently so they can fly. Their bones are hollow, making them lightweight. They have feathers. They don't nurse milk. Milk would have a lot of water, and that would be heavy. And if they had a bladder and drank a lot of water, that would be heavy. So they're more efficient with the little bit of water that they do drink. And I had a friend tell me this year, his daughter, because his daughter shared some chicks with my daughter last year, and they said every time the chicken bends down and takes a little drink, and it tips its head up and thanks the Lord. If you've ever watched a chicken, they bend down and tip their head up, bend down, they don't get a whole lot of water that way. And so they're very efficient, and that's why chicken manure, you've been told, be careful, don't use too much of it, it's hot. What they mean by that is it's got nitrogen in it. All these other animal manures, they have nitrogen, but it's a lot lower because they urinate the nitrogen all over the pasture. So the chicken nitrogen is concentrated, and the turkey nitrogen is concentrated in their droppings. So you'll see that in the woods, wherever the turkeys have been. Up in the trees or eating acorns, they drop great big turkey droppings. And so that's why our persimmon trees did so well. And not only that, if you track the cardinals and some of the other birds, we learned something really exciting this year. While you're going about your duties and you don't have time to get in the garden every day, most of you have work for a living or do something, they're out looking through your tomato cages. They like to sit on the tomato cages and occasionally go to the bathroom on my tomato. But while they're doing that, I didn't realize that they're finding tomato worms and eating them. So my wife saw the cardinal eating tomato worms this year, and I saw where there was tomato worms, but I couldn't find them. And then I actually looked it up online and found a couple of videos of cardinals, and a couple of other birds will eat tomato worms, tomato hornworms. So they're not 100%, but they'll save us some of the labor, make your gardening easier. So that's why I say all things work together. If you just monocrop a whole field and knock all the trees and everything down, it's going to be harder if you want to do things simple. But if you have a small plot, the way everyone has a little big garden, and you have a few plants here and a few there, and you feed the birds, you feed the flowers, have some pretty flowers, it brings in the beneficial insects. It all works together. If you plant dill, for example, it brings in a little fly that will, what's that, technic fly? I think it destroys the squash bugs that we are so plagued with. Just learning that. How are we doing on time? Oh, 9 minutes. Wow. Okay, there's a gentle swarm. We finally got on top of the hill this year. My son was working them with nothing. Okay, leaves. This time of year, what am I doing? Every chance I get, I'm raking leaves, putting them on the garden. It insulates the soil. It keeps it warm. So in the springtime, the bacteria is not going to make your plants green until the soil is warm enough that the bacteria is active. You have leaves on top of the soil. Juby picked this garden spot on top of the hill. It was the worst garden spot, but her heart was set on gardening there. And she wanted this. I said, okay, it didn't do very good this year. Where do you want your garden next year? The same spot, bigger. So we took some of the tree limbs out to get more sun in. It's gravelly, well drained. And so I said, okay, I put a bunch of comfrey leaves down, and I got leaves and leaves and leaves and dumped pots of leaves on there to hold in the moisture. And for the next springtime, she got these beautiful tomato plants she had ready, started inside, and she dug the soil over here that was, I didn't do anything to. And I said, well, what are you doing there? Just come over here where the leaves are, where you planted last year, and pull the leaves apart. We put a handful of minerals in there, the same thing I do for the corn. And put the tomato cage. And her tomatoes over here where we did nothing, the tomatoes did nothing. And the tomatoes over here where the leaves were, the tomatoes, they were the first ripe tomatoes, beautiful tomatoes. There's her basket of tomatoes. Hers were right before mine. And so simple, free leaves. There was no nitrogen added to those tomatoes. Just be careful with not to breathe in mold. If you've ever had pneumonia and you're working with leaves, like I said, every chance I get, I'll rake them up. But if you have a pile of steaming, molding compost and you go to turn it over, I just wait until the wind blows it away or wait till it stops steaming. You don't want to breathe in that mold because if you have scar tissue and you get that in your lungs, it could start growing in those spots where you don't have any cilia to. And there have been a couple of friends I've known around here. I've had lung problems from the military, and I've had a couple of friends that had a growth in there that had the same kind of problems. High humidity, and you get leaf mold, and it does great in the garden, but you don't want your compost hot right outside your window. You want it off at a distance. Country living, no regrets. The Lord put us in the garden, and He planted every tree that was pleasant to the sight and good for food. So all things, it's a joy to be in the garden. We've been in Bolivia with the children. We get opportunities to see the nature. We had a monkey. The dog was barking her head off for half an hour. We decided to go out and see what she was barking about. She chased the mother off, and she had this little deer she was keeping corralled for a while. And we enjoyed that for a while, and I let it go. So variety again. We can have a lot of variety. I had my eggplants at Uchee Pines in Alabama, 2 big rows of eggplants, and the little flea beetles ate all my leaves. And there was this little Ukrainian grandma. I made all the people there that wanted them. I had 10 acres. I made them little garden spots. And she had this little garden with just a couple, like one eggplant and a couple of tomatoes. And she watered it every day. She was out there. And she didn't have any flea beetles on it. I started learning. Sometimes less is better. You mix things together and plant some over here, some over there, and the insects might be here and they're not over there. Rotate your crops, put them in different areas. Here's the picture of where I just put a string up and pickaxe and put my handful of minerals down there. And if it's summer when I have comfrey, my son showed me how to, if any have a Vitamix blender, nice strong blender, they're warranted 12 years, and we've used them like 20 years. Just throw the comfrey leaves in there with some water and a little bit of blackstrap molasses. And then I'll put it in a bucket, dump it back and forth. Sometimes I even made a big commercial bulk tank, 250-gallon tank, and I'll blend up several blenders full of comfrey and a little bit of molasses in there. Molasses has the sugar and it has some minerals to feed the bacteria. And I'll put my little fish tank air bubbler stone in there and let it bubble while I'm eating my meal. Or if you just have buckets, I've dumped the buckets back and forth. That's what I did with my 12-foot tall purple corn. I didn't even have an air stone then, but now when I make a big tank and I want to water lots of corn, I'll let it bubble sometimes all night long. And that aerates and feeds the bacteria and multiplies it with the sugar. And let the life in the soil fertilize for you. So there's my favorite Missouri tool, the pickaxe. There's a place called easydigging.com that has, if you don't like these short handle ones that they put on them, I'm not sure why they make pickaxes like that. There's some with nice long handles at easydigging.com. And same way with these ossidones, this was my favorite tool if you're in a place that doesn't have rock. So it's not my Missouri favorite tool. but it's heavier than most hose. It's a thick piece of metal. And that's what we cleared the property with in Bolivia, gardening with an osadone. Osadone means hoe. They use them in Brazil and Bolivia and Africa and Japan. Japan actually makes a nicer one that has a square handle. Sometimes you can see that circular handle and the circular chunk of metal. Sometimes that loosens up and your head will start spinning around, so you need to tighten that up again. But the Japanese made a nice rectangular one that can't turn, but it's got a short handle because the Asians are not as tall as us. There's some of our Bolivia garden. And we went in the winter time. We gardened at a school, and it wasn't supposed to rain because it was winter, but the Lord sent rain on the garden until we got water lines in. Once we got the water lines installed, it stopped raining. In about 5 months, we used hand tools and made this garden. And we made wooden flats. We couldn't buy plastic flats. We could buy some plastic cups and drill a hole in them. And for the soil, we used a mixture of, there it was Brazil nut dust, but we've also used sawdust, 1 shovel of sand and 2 shovels of sawdust. Now there's no nutrition in there, but it makes a nice, you mix a little lime in there and your seeds will germinate. And it's a sterile soil, so there's no weeds in it. It's lightweight soil. Use coarse sand is better right now. I just go down to the river and get some sand, mix it in with, you can mix it with peat moss, you can mix it with sawdust and make a sterile soil. So if you grow in pots like I do, you can put nice clay in there for your earthworms, and then at the top, a couple of inches, put some peat moss, and that's sterile, so you almost don't have to weed. So if you're an elderly person and you can't get down in the garden, put a nice big pot outside your door and fill it up, and you can garden right here at this level. Put a little bit of potting soil on top. There's no nutrition in potting soil, not much, but it's easy to weed. There's the cheap fence for deer. I don't recommend that. Here's some nice expensive fence for deer. The cheap stuff, they run right through it and it doesn't last. And the weed, you try to take it up and the weeds tear it apart. There is a good brand called 10X Premium. I got mine from Home Depot, and it has a 750-pound breaking strength. And it's more costly, but it's rated at 15 years. So that's what I used around this corn this year. Here's my deer protection. I've tried pallets, but pallets, after a few years, a couple of years, they start rotting down. They're not protected. If you stand on one to try to weed them or something, what happened to me is I stepped up on there and that broke off, and then I fell down on my rib on the top. I don't like that. That hurt. So, and they get kind of ugly, and they do keep the deer out. They work. I mean, I planted 200 pine trees and the deer pulled them all up except 1 or 2. So I had to start finding some other way. I don't hunt deer, so I had to find some way to pray that somebody can get them that wants them. But we still have a lot of deer. We have a lot of woods around here. There's a lot of wildlife. And so pallets are free. I just put 2, 4, 6, 8 screws to hold them together. And my trees were able to, I raised up some of my white pines for tea, pine needle tea. When I got this tall, I put one out there, and I figured I'll take care of that tomorrow. The next day, the deer had destroyed it before I put any protection around it. So what I started doing, I replanted it, and I started grabbing all these limbs out of the woods and just piling them around there. I said, I'm going to make it inconvenient for the deer to get up there and eat it. Just put limbs in his way. And the deer have never touched that one. So I started doing some similar things. It's not, these tubes, those are expensive, extremely expensive, and they don't work very good. And the tree gets kind of spindly, and you just can't, they get full of wasps. So I found these food grade barrels on Craigslist for about $10 a piece, where those tubes were more than that. They're probably anywhere up to $20 a piece. And they just don't work very good. To keep the deer, they do keep the deer out, but your trees don't grow very well. I found these poly barrels, food grade poly barrels, cut the bottom out, drilled a few holes for ventilation. And I like the white ones just because they don't attract the sun as much. They're not going to be as hot. And I can see in there, I can throw some mulch, I can throw some comfrey water down in there, fertilize them, just take care of them a lot easier. Well, it keeps them from rubbing their antlers and girdling the tree. They can still eat the fruit off the top if they want to, but most of my destruction comes from their rubbing their antlers. You see that picture of that antler there? Right next to the rub tree, you see the shreds of tree fiber on the antlers. I don't know why they do that. But they do. They destroy a lot of. I've lost probably over the years. The first year I called the game warden out there. I showed him I've lost $1,000 of trees, fruit trees, and he gave me permission for like 10 days. But I'm not a hunter. I don't sit out in the woods. There's too many things to do, and I didn't get anything. So I got to find alternative ways. So here's my potato patch this year. I thought, well, deer don't like potatoes. I planted them where there was no fence. Once the potatoes started flowering and you put some good nutrition into the potatoes, they know if you put nutrition in there to make your plants healthy, you put some sea solids or any of that stuff, they can taste that and they like that. And they ate, once they're flowering, they ate all the tops off my potatoes. And so this year I just grew some of these. You know, the deer can leap. They'll leap over the fences. You've all seen deer hopping and leaping. They're graceful and strong. And they're vegans and they don't break their bones and they jump really high. They don't drink cow milk. But they're lazy too. They like to walk right down my driveway and my mowed paths. So they don't like to walk through the briars. They're kind of like us. So I just throw some of these branches in the way, and they didn't even bother the potatoes this year. A couple of branches in the way. I pulled those back a little bit, but they were right up next to the potatoes. And they walked around instead and found something else that they like to eat. And I also put those around my pear trees this year. I can't mow around them and make them look really pretty, but at least it gives them a couple of years to get some height before the deer can come up. And because pear leaves are sweet, pear leaves smell good. Okay, storing sweet potatoes through the winter. If you want to keep your own potatoes, I learned by accident. The first year I had them in little boxes, and they did fine. And I had them in the fall, and then in the springtime I planted them. The next year I bought them. I bought larger quantities, and I put them in these red totes, and they have holes so they could breathe. And I stored them on top of each other. And you see how by the time it was time to plant them, I had like 2-3 foot long sprouts. They almost expelled. They were all wrinkled up and almost used up all the energy inside the potato to grow these sprouts while they're still in my pantry down in the dark. So what did I do wrong? I talked to the potato people, and if they get ethylene gas from any other food in your pantry, it causes them to sprout to try to start growing. And it seemed like it goes up. And I read that ethylene gas doesn't come out of potatoes, but I'm not so sure because the potatoes on the bottom had less sprouts. The ones on the top had the biggest sprouts. I think the gas rises. And so this company, Holbrook Seed Potatoes, I've been getting my favorite potatoes for years from in Wisconsin. I used to ask them, can I order, because they would sell out of my favorite varieties, can I order these in the fall and keep them in my pantry? That's why I ran into this problem. And so this last year, they've made another change, and they allow you to order them in the fall, and they'll ship them in the spring. So now, unless you're keeping your own seed potatoes, there are some people that will do that for you. So I've already ordered my potatoes this year for next year. And they have a lot of colors there. That's why I like them. Well, what I found the first year was to keep them in smaller boxes, separated, so the gas doesn't concentrate. And if they're going to breathe, you need to have some kind of airflow so it blows the gas away from them. And if the gas is just sitting still, it's going to cause them to ripen and try to grow. Same thing if you store things in a refrigerator, your scion wood for grafting, you want to double bag it, because if you have fruits and vegetables in the same refrigerator where you're storing your seeds and your other plants, when that ethylene gas is ripening, it'll tell your other seeds, hey, it's springtime, turn on and try to start growing, so they lose germination. So that's another thing I read, is if you don't wash them, they will last longer and they won't sprout as quick. Store potatoes are washed. Yeah. It prevents one rotting from causing the other ones to rot, and it also reduces the sprouting. So this year we had a new challenge. I think if one starts emitting ethylene gas and the rest of them start emitting it, start ripening all together, I think it's they work together that way, is my guess. I don't know, but I've seen it. Here, Juby had these big tomatoes. Hers were started first. She gets them out planted. And we went out a week later and there's almost no tomato plants. What is going on? They were already this tall and the cutworm didn't get them after. Normally you lose tomato plants like the first or second day you plant them, the cutworms, unless you wrap a little paper or something around them. I found out there was a rabbit out there, her tomatoes, it had the nutrients on them and it was attracted, and it just chewed the plant down and left this little stub sticking out of the ground. So I took some row cover, that's a breathable cloth that if any of you have row cover, and I just wrapped strips around the bottom of the tomato cages. When I planted mine, and we took care of hers as well, we replanted and we put some protection around them and just put a little spring clamp on there. And then they grew even better than in the past, because insects, other things didn't find them as quick either until they reached up out of that about 1 foot tall curtain around the bottom of the tomato cage. And the rabbits didn't see them out of sight. I guess they didn't smell them. And that worked great. I'm going to do that again next year. There's my crow. I lost a lot of things to crows. We could talk too long about that, but so I got these off from Amazon. Crows are smart. They live year after year, and once they learn to steal your food, they'll come back next year and steal it. And the next year they'll steal pears, eggs, you name it, berries. And so if you look like a bad guy to them, if they see you walking around with a dead crow, this is plastic, but it's got crow feathers on it, and you put it on the fence, they recognize you. Unless you come disguised, they'll remember who you are. So if I drive the truck down, they'll take off. And I put this on top of a barrel, or I put it on the fence and move it every couple of days. Otherwise they get used to it. And they'll come down, actually kick this thing over, trying, hey, get up, friend, get up, and realize, hey, you're dead. I better get out of here. So they're really smart. And if they see a couple of dead crows around, they think that you're the bad guy, and they got to stay away from there. So that's worked on my corn. Yes, it's a fake plastic crow. It's just plastic with feathers glued onto it. It's hollow. This one's about 3 years old, so it's losing most of its feathers. It's been out in the rain and sun. It looked more real when I first got it. There are some that are cheaper that don't have any feathers. So they used to pick out my entire row of corn. The other thing you do with your corn is drill the seed deeper, because they'll pull it out, eat the kernel, and leave the roots in the sun, and all your corn dies. I tried putting it all in hot pepper and planting it again, and they like it. They don't mind it's hot pepper. I guess it doesn't bother them. And they still ate it all. But if you plant it a couple inches deep, one time my son, when he was little, he dug a hole down and planted the corn 6 inches deep, and he planted about a handful of it. And it all came up, and I dug down in, and it was 6 inches deep, and the corn still came up. It took it a little longer. And so that's what the farmers do to get ahead. You plant your wheat right now, you plant it a couple inches deep, and that will protect the crown against the frost damage. And you plant your corn early, you get it deeper, as long as it's not too wet. Artemisinin, you can grow it. It's anti-parasite. We use it for ourselves. We use it for our livestock. And we have sheep now for several years, and all I do we haven't lost any sheep to parasites in the last few years. We just take some sea salt, and I mix the artemisinin in it. They hate artemisinin because it's bitter, but they love the salt. So they will eat, instead of indulging on the salt and eating lots of it, they'll eat a little bit of salt, and they just come and free feed on that. They can smell it. The first time I mixed it in there, the rams, they're animals. And so the ewes are up there eating it, and the ram comes and knocks everybody out of the way and gobbles a big mouthful of this stuff up, and then he starts spitting it back out because it was really bitter. But it's an anti-parasite, and I could talk about that for a long time. It's easy to grow, some annual seeds. Leah? Well, Leah gets some kind of lung parasite. I don't know where she gets it, but she'll get coughing, and she's about to die. She'll have bad breath, our dog. So we'll take the artemisinin capsule and put it in a date. She'll eat the date and spit the capsule out because she tastes that bitter capsule. So we rub a little peanut butter all the way around the capsule so she can't taste it. Stick it inside the date, and then she gobbles it down. Within 2 days, she stops coughing. We've had that happen for a couple of years now. We've treated her about 4 different times. She'll get coughing really bad, and just amazing, simple plants. They've used it for several thousand years for malaria. They used it for my wife for malaria in Bolivia. The school children and the teachers took the government drug for 2 weeks and were sick. I gave it to her for 2 days, every 6 hours artemisinin, and her symptoms were gone in 2 days. Tomatoes, if you get blossom end rot, I found the quickest solution. If you're growing them in pots, the peat moss just doesn't hold a lot of nutrition if you don't have enough clay below it. Pickling lime is calcium hydroxide. You got to be careful with it. If you get it in your eye, it could blind you. They don't warn you on the pickling lime, but it can. It's a fast-acting calcium. Just put a tablespoon of water in, and it's more harsh, but it'll supply the calcium and get rid of that blossom end rot on your tomatoes. Blueberries, the best thing for anyone grow blueberries. You struggle with the birds stealing them. Wow. Doug Downs, he has to make that whole aviary thing to keep the birds out. I found that just by observation, some years I struggle, some years I don't. And what I found is you can go out to the mulberry tree and shake the limb, and all the berries start falling off. And the bugs like it. All the animals are out there under the mulberry tree, the deer, the raccoon, the birds. And so the birds get a treat. They get an insect and a berry, like cake with frosting. But the blueberries, they have to struggle to get them off the plant. So in years that we don't get a late frost and the mulberries have lots of fruit, they leave the blueberries alone. They go for the gravy food, the easy food. So plant mulberry near your blueberries. And here's one of these squash here. I am amazed by this. I haven't been able to grow squash or pumpkin without a big struggle because of the squash bugs and the what are those? They come at night. The vine borers. You get a beautiful plant, and all of a sudden it wilts and it's dead because you got a maggot by your vine. Well, this here comes from Guatemala. It looks like a butternut. It tastes like a butternut, but you cut it and it's green inside and it's sweet. These seeds, if you want, take this one, somebody, and keep the seeds. Whoever takes it, you have to be someone that wants to save the seeds and plant it next year. If you just plant a few of these seeds or save some of your neighbors, I planted 3 plants in a tomato cage to grow up with in between my tomatoes, because I tell you, I mix my plant. It grew 30 feet wide and 60 feet long in the garden soil, and I got all those off from those 3 plants, and there were more after I tillered the soil that I had missed. They're grown in the grass. And so I had some more plants over there that I planted that were out in the lawn. And I wanted to experiment and see, because underneath the leaves, they would get roots, some of them a foot long root. And so I pulled up the plant and I left the roots in the sun for 3 days. because it was raining for 2 days and then the next day was sunny. And so the third day when it was sunny, the plant didn't even wilt. So if a vine borer, they always lay their eggs right at the base of the plant. This one is what would you say, immune to the vine borer, I guess, once it gets established, because the plant will live because it sends down roots under the leaves. Not only that, it had a variegated leaf like a kashaw squash. Kashaw is not very tasty. Bugs and animals, like people, all have their favorite things they like to eat. And they don't touch the kashaw squash unless there's nothing else to eat. They'll go for Hubbard squash is like a favorite of vine borers. So these squash, they're just amazing to me and prolific. And I mowed some off in my wife's garden and it grew leaves back on it. I thought it was done, yes. Butternut. Looks like butternut taste, and it makes a good, tastes like pumpkin pie. Green is just not ripe yet, all the way ripe. I had to pull them up when some of them were ripe and some were still green because the squash bugs were so, I hadn't looked at them in a week, and it's down in the bottom, and there were so many squash bugs. I didn't want them to be there for next year. And so I just harvested all the squash and then I tillered my vines under so those squash bugs won't be there for next year's crop, whatever I plant. Oh, a roll cover, there's another solution to bugs. I still have that kale, it's this tall now, and it's been through the 20-degree weather. And that's one reason, this is called ag fabric. I've used that for 4 or 5 years now. The only problem with it is it tends to snag if you're not careful. But I use that to keep the insects out, no sprays. It does, I might have to open it up once in a while because some of the insects hatch up out of the soil and control them, but it's very minimal compared to them just flying by and seeing your food and come to attack it. Earthworms, like the wood chips are great for earthworms because when it rains a lot and the earthworms are in the flood, they will have a place to come up higher above the flood where the birds can't see them and gobble them up. And great place to grow garlic. There's my favorite gardening tool, the tine. So if you can make a rototiller, maybe some of you are inventive, a rototiller with hard enough tines, those small tines instead of blades, that would be earthworm friendly. I do have a friend that has a European spader that's easier on the soil, but those are very expensive. And this is what I used to do. It looks like great, but there was no earthworms alive out there. I over-tilled it, and the earthworms were stickly. So if you need to till, and sometimes you do, till her quickly. Don't till her really slow. Till her quickly so you don't damage them as much, and you'll leave the roots in there, and then the earthworms and the bacteria can eat it. Let them eat it and break it down. And it'll hold your soil. I had an erosion problem because the rain, if it looks like that and you get a heavy rain, your soil starts washing away. You need something to hold it there. Maggots in your fruit attract the hummingbirds. All we have time to say about that. Plant something for your hummingbirds, and they eat the Drusilla fly that lays those. They've even been seen by a friend of mine chasing crows off from the strawberry field. So if you track the hummingbirds, and they watch over your plants while you're in bed. Okay, we got citrus in Missouri. It's not the best citrus, but it's citrus. Stays out all winter. Looking for I wanted to share this if I can. Hardening plants. Any of you start plants inside? Okay, and then if you put them outside, have you ever had them sunburn and get killed? So you probably learn to harden them take them out for 2 hours, bring them in, take them out for 2 hours, bring them in, take them out for 2 hours for about 3 days, put them out on a cloudy day. And they build up the waxy cuticle. They lose that waxy cuticle so that they can get more when there's low light, so they can get more light in, use it efficiently. And then when they're out in the sun, they build that up just like you build up your tan to get used to the sun. They build that up to protect them and to hold in moisture. Well, anyone read the Bible? Anyone offended by the Bible? I believe in all 10 commandments. And we went to church, and I had all these. We had like 120 tomato plants in cups out on the porch, and I water them every day, but it takes a long time to water 120 cups. And we went to church, come home, and my wife says, "You need to water those tomato plants; they're wilty." And I thought, if it was 1 or 2 tomato plants, I might water them, but that's a lot of work, and then I'll just kind of forget it's Sabbath. So I said, if the Lord, they're His. Right? If the Lord wants to kill the tomato plants, I won't plant tomatoes this year. And so I left the tomato plants. The next day I watered them, and they perked back up, and they did fine. And then I read and found that wilting is also a part of the hardening process. If they're allowed to wilt, they start building up the cuticle to conserve moisture. So if you observe the Sabbath or you go to church and you don't want to work 1 day a week, and you started hardening them off on Thursday and Friday or Friday and Saturday, and then you take a day off, then that finishes off your 3 days of hardening, and they're ready to plant out. So that was my experience. I'm kind of excited to learn that. And if you have tomato cages and it's going to hail, and you put your tomatoes out already instead of going out and trying to bring them back in, I just put these plant pots in the tomato cages, and that gives them a little protection. Also, if you're not sure if you got them fully hardened off, that gives them, when the sun's right up in the hottest part of the day, that gives them a little shade. So they get sun in the morning, sun in the evening, and they finish hardening themselves off. That's a really convenient way to just put that over the top of them. You can invert it and put it on top of them if they're on the ground, right down to the ground to protect them from frost. Okay. Gardening's a big topic. So the last thought I'll share with you, and then I'll open it to you, is you see where the red line is. All of you are aware where Jerusalem is. Probably hear about Jerusalem in the news. That was known in the Bible as the land flowing to milk and honey. The Lord was taking them to the promised land. Well, if you look at a satellite photo, it doesn't look very green. Milk and honey means there's lots of grass for the cattle and lots of flowers for the bees to make honey. Well, right now, if they want to water, they've got to use irrigation. And if you look where that latitude is, down in the southern part of the U.S., it may be, I think they're at 2,000 feet high, 2,400 feet high in Jerusalem. And I'm not sure what the whole promised land measures out at. So you got to get closer to Texas probably to get that up in the higher altitude. But the point being is I heard a story when I was gardening in Uchee Pines, and this young man said that when his dad planted a crop, his grandpa planted a crop, he always knelt down and prayed and asked the Lord to watch over that crop. And he said, my grandpa never lost a crop. And so I don't care if you plant something, we can have drought, the sun has to shine, the rain has to come, the hail can take it out, the insects can take it out, the deer, and we can name about 20 other varmints that can come and eat it. If you trust in the Lord and ask Him to watch over it, you're not going to go hungry. So that's I think gardening is there's a lot in the Bible about gardening. And so I just wanted to give credit to the Lord, because I don't have any of the success on my own. I've had a lot of failures. I've planted a squash here and got nothing because the insects killed it. and there was squash out back that was in the compost around my fruit trees, and I didn't even know it came up, and it had, and there where the deer are, and it had fruit all over it. So I harvested squash that I didn't plant, and the ones that I plant, I got nothing. I learned to trust in the Lord. Okay, I'll go ahead and close, and if anyone wants to stay after, you're welcome to. Thank you for coming out this evening. Lord, we ask safe travel for those that came out, and thank you, Lord, for feeding us. Thank you for food from our gardens, and help us to continue to share with each other ways that you teach us and provide for us. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.